This week, join me as I examine one of the Bible's most powerful and controversial figures, King David. He's known most famously as the young shepherd who slayed the giant Goliath, but his story and legacy reverberate beyond that single act. Some believe his kingship unified the people of Israel and produced the lineage that gave rise to Jesus Christ. Others believe David never lived at all. What's the real story? Was he man or myth? To find out, I'll take the path that David might have used to establish the city of Jerusalem. Explore what it took to be a master shepherd.
I know, I'm trying to get on the other side of him.
And gain privileged access to one of the world's most guarded archaeological sites. We're digging for the truth.
It's not simple.
It's not simple.
Yeah.
And we're going to extremes to do it.
Oh, that was awesome!
The time, 3,000 years ago. The place, Jerusalem. According to the Bible, David, the king of the Israelites, founded a dynasty whose significance endures to this day.
In Israel, on the flag of the country, we have the Magen David, the Star of David. And Jerusalem itself is called the City of David. Hi, I'm Josh Bernstein. I've come back to the Holy Land to explore the legend and legacy of King David, and to hopefully determine if he was man, myth, or somewhere in between.
The great sculptor Michelangelo carved the most famous image of the biblical king. But David's fame extends far beyond this single masterpiece. The story of David is in fact the center around which much of the biblical narrative is built. In Hebrew, David means beloved, and the name David appears more often in the Bible than any other, including Jesus. Today, his story remains etched in Western thought. The battle between David and Goliath has come to symbolize the struggle of the underdog, of all who rely on skill and faith to defeat oppression. King David's stature here is so legendary, Israel's finest and most famous hotel is named after him, and it sits on King David's Street. To explore the truth about David, we have to start with a biblical tale that is both complex and contradictory. I'm meeting with my friend Professor Israel Finkelstein, an Israeli archaeologist and biblical scholar, to better understand David's story.
But what I think is fascinating is King David is not a perfect man. He's a king, and he's an adulterer. He's also a warrior, someone who slaughters a lot of people.
Well, everybody drops dead around him. He's not this ultimate monarch. He's a problematic guy. In a way, when you read the text, he's a mixed bag.
How much of that story is true?
The story as we read it today is an accumulation of many stories and many periods and many layers. You cannot read the story of King David as one story that reflects one era written by one author.
Israel explains that most biblical historians believe if David was real, that he would have lived around the 10th century BC. But the bulk of his story wasn't written down until many centuries later.
Can people find proof of King David today?
Well, you can find proof for the 10th century, and then you should interpret the proof to see whether it fits. It's not only a matter of going with the Bible in one hand and the spade in the other hand, rushing to the field to find King David.
Right, okay.
But that hasn't stopped people from trying. Jerusalem and its surroundings are some of the most excavated lands on the face of the earth. For 2 centuries, archaeologists have been finding significant evidence corroborating stories in the Bible, but they have yet to find proof of King David himself. Some of them believe artifacts may be found here, under Jerusalem's Temple Mount. But this is both sacred and hotly contested ground. In the late 1990s, the Muslim authorities who control part of the Temple Mount secretly hauled away 4,000 tons of ancient debris from the site. The purpose? To make way for new construction. But for many Israelis, this was an act of cultural vandalism. Outraged archaeologists petitioned the government to commission an off-site salvage operation. It's taking place here, on the northeastern edge of Jerusalem, fewer than 2 miles from the Temple Mount.
Israel has thousands of archaeological sites, but none holds more promise than the Temple Mount, which is where this pile and hundreds like it came from. Today, archaeologists and volunteers are sifting through this rubble, stone by stone, pebble by pebble, looking for more information about Israel's past, and possibly evidence of King David himself. Let's go check it out.
This is s03e 10, archaeologist and co-founder of the Temple Mount salvage operation at Tzurim Valley National Park.
So explain to me what exactly the process is.
Yeah, okay, so outside we have all the pile that has been already been sifted with a special machine. And inside we're actually doing a second sifting, wet sifting.
Okay.
We soak all the material in water, and then we start collecting all the...
Any artifacts?
Anything which is not a natural stone, any man-made artifacts. Every bucket here is full of artifacts, archaeological artifacts.
s03e tells me they've found hundreds of artifacts, but this clay piece inscribed with a priestly seal stands out from the rest. It dates roughly to the end of Jerusalem's First Temple period, around the 7th and 6th centuries BC. It's the first object with Hebrew writing ever recovered from the Temple Mount.
Anything here from the time of King David?
We have pottery shards from the time of King David, from the 10th century BC, and this is probably a bowl. It may have been used in the temple itself.
So perhaps something from King David himself can be found here.
It doesn't say David. Can you put me to work and I can actually do some of this?
s03e tells me the process is simple.
It's been soaked with water.
Okay.
Step 1, grab a bucket of rubble.
Okay. And then dump it out?
Dump it over here.
Slowly? Doesn't matter.
No, do it fast. It's okay.
Fast?
Yeah.
What? We just spread it out?
Yeah, spread it around. Spread it out around. And
Okay.
now spray it. Yeah,
spray
spray. Yeah. And that's it.
Step 2, spray it clean.
And while you're doing this, you're kind of looking, hoping, watching, thinking maybe you'll find something?
Yeah, sure.
Step 3, search for artifacts, potsherds, coins,
Okay.
anything unusual.
This?
This is probably a work stone.
Yeah. Well, you gotta have a good eye
I'll-
for what's
yeah.
significant. I'm looking for anything with a coin or an inscription or...
Any inscription from the biblical period would, in fact, be priceless. And there's always a possibility.
Other things.
Yeah?
Because we're going to see
All interesting finds are sorted, collected, and conserved after they leave this tent.
some other sites.
What percentage of the debris have you guys gotten through?
Maybe 30.
Only 30%?
Yeah, it will take many years to finish it.
In coming years, s03e and his team hope to find artifacts with inscriptions dating to the 10th century BC.
No inscriptions on it, though.
Among other things, they'd like to find anything that connects with King David and his noble lineage. That would be a very big deal. That was the case with this artifact. Known as the ivory pomegranate, it was discovered in 1979 in one of Israel's many antiquity shops. Traded on the private market for a decade, this ancient artifact was finally purchased by the Israel Museum. But it's the inscription on the artifact, not its age, that makes it so special. According to the text scratched on its surface, this is a relic from the Temple of Solomon, King David's son. It's the first of its kind ever found. At the time of its discovery, it was believed to be the closest physical link to David ever revealed. To find out more, I'm traveling nearly 40 miles northwest from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv. I'm meeting Dr. Yuval Gorin, key archaeologist and scientist involved in testing the artifact's authenticity. Yuval explains that the real ivory pomegranate is kept under lock and key in the Israel Museum. So we'll be working with a replica to explore what goes into proving an object's legitimacy and worth. What do we do? Walk me through the process.
The ideal thing is to start with a simple, the lowest magnification, and then go on to the more detailed examinations.
Yuval says before the pomegranate ever made it to him, it underwent inspections by other scholars. They used microscopes, just like this one. Low magnification allowed the scientists to visually survey the artifact's inscription and its patina, a chemical residue that formed on the surface of the pomegranate over time.
You're not just studying this, like the surface, you're studying the patina on the surface, as well as the material stuck in the crevices.
Yes.
The pomegranate appeared to be authentic.
Yeah, you really can see what's stuck in all the little crevices.
Yes.
Very well.
Yuval's job, however, was to go beyond the previous testing.
Then what'd you do?
We scraped tiny samples of it.
Yuval took small scrapings of the patina from the letters and examined them under a more powerful microscope.
And this is the actual sample from the real pomegranate?
Yes.
In the museum?
Yes. Okay, and here we see a tiny bit of the patina.
What did this tell you?
Well, it looks like ancient sediment from a site.
But this wasn't all Yuval saw.
The problem is that together with it, we found artificial material. It's probably glue.
To test the glue, Yuval had to break out the latest technology to reach maximum magnification, a scanning electron microscope.
So Yuval, what did you find then when you put this under the big guns?
We found out that the patina by itself contained the glue. This by itself sheds a lot of doubt about the authenticity of the inscription. Mm-hmm. We can say beyond any reasonable doubt that this inscription is modern.
It was an old pomegranate that had modern writing.
It is most likely not authentic. The pomegranate is authentic, but the inscription is not.
Gotcha.
Some research suggests a third of all inscribed artifacts from the biblical era may be forgeries.
But,
Yuval and others believe it's a grave problem for archaeology.
Somebody took something like that and added on it an inscription that makes it unique, very special, historically important. Mm-hmm. And of
could
course,
sell it for $500,000.
Yes.
$550,000 to be precise. Reportedly, that's what the Israel Museum paid to an anonymous dealer for the ivory pomegranate. Too bad the inscription was most likely faked. Which is an important point to recognize. When it comes to biblical archaeology, the stakes are very high. So buyer, beware. I'm in the Holy Land of Israel on the search for evidence of King David.
Doesn't matter.
No.
So far, I've learned there's a mountain of rubble left to sift through. There are also potentially falsified artifacts to throw a person off course. And then there's the Bible itself. The books of the Old Testament tell us most of what we know about King David and the ancient land from which he came. Before the 10th century BC, two powerful empires dominate the Near East. Between the two is the land of Canaan. It's a war zone, a loose confederacy of battling peoples and shifting allegiances. Two of the most powerful peoples, the Israelites and the Philistines, regularly clash swords over territorial claims. As a young boy, David appears in the middle of this conflict. In fact, he wins a decisive battle by killing a giant named Goliath, better known as Goliath.
According to the first book of Samuel, David was born in Bethlehem. He was the youngest of 8 sons and spent his early days tending sheep in the southern hill country of Judah. Perhaps we can get closer to David through his occupation, shepherd.
I'm traveling about 70 miles north, into the heart of the ancient northern kingdom of Israel, near the modern-day town of Megiddo. I've come here to meet Aryeh Be'ar, a modern-day sheep farmer.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Aryeh manages more than 1,000 animals. Today, he has all the high-tech tools. But when he was a boy, he was an old-school herder.
So is David, as a young boy, is a shepherd?
Yeah.
Is that hard work?
Very hard work.
Why? They're just sheep.
Yes.
How hard can sheep be?
Because he is a shepherd, had to be with his sheep day and night, 24 hours a day. The shepherd had to be very clever and wise.
Aryeh says sheep herding in modern Israel is tough. The land is dry and unforgiving. But David would have faced even greater challenges. Fierce predators, wolves, bears, even lions roamed the landscape. On top of that, he was working in the middle of a war zone. For David to survive, he had to learn how to fight.
So in some ways, David's time as a shepherd trained him to be a good warrior and king.
Of course.
Can you show me some tricks with the flock so I can get a feel for what David had to do?
Okay.
Yeah? All right. Wait, we got to tend to our flock. We'll be right back. Let's go get our flock. Are you okay, guys? Calm down. Stay with us. It's okay. Oh, we're surrounded. Okay? Wait, they're over here too. Hey. So I guess where the flock wants to go, it can go.
Sheep may not be the smartest creatures on the planet, but they sure know how to make a guy run.
No.
I know. I'm trying to get on the other side of him.
Stay.
All right, okay, there you go. No, they're getting away from us.
It's not simple.
It's not simple.
Yeah.
To do this right, the way David would have done it, Aryeh tells me I need at least one of two critical but simple tools, a stick or a rock.
So this is lesson 1, flock control. How to get the sheep to go where you want them to go instead of where they want to go. Take a stone and throw it in front of them. Or wherever you don't want them to go. Just don't hit them.
Your first steps as a shepherd.
Yes.
I am too old, but maybe you will be a king.
Well.
My time with Aryeh's got me thinking. I used to imagine the young David as a simple shepherd tending his flock, but now I see him as a cunning young warrior in the making. Next, I want to find out how David put his shepherding skills to the ultimate test. No story of David is more well known than a famous victory he had near a city named Gat against a giant named Goliath. Perhaps evidence of David's existence can be found in the region of this famous battle. From Jerusalem, I'm traveling 35 miles southwest to modern-day Tel Esafi to meet archaeologist and professor Aaron Meyer. Maybe he can shed some light on the Philistines and their most famous warrior.
Hi, Aaron.
How you doing, Josh? Welcome to Gat.
Thank you very much.
Aaron tells me that since warring peoples took land as well as material goods from each other, archaeologists can't rely solely on artifacts such as pottery to distinguish between territorial zones. But Aaron explains archaeologists have been able to use biblical clues, topographical descriptions to determine that this site was the Philistine city of Gat, home of the giant Goliath.
Okay, so help me understand this landscape through biblical eyes.
All the way out in the background there, that's the Judean hills. That's where David and Saul came from. That's where the Judean heartland is.
Okay.
Where we're standing now and towards the west, that's Philistia.
So we can use the Bible to some degree as a map, right? We can use the words of the Bible to help us find a region where the Philistines lived and where Gat, one of the 5 cities, may have existed.
Absolutely.
Why here?
Aaron says this site was perfect in terms of available natural resources and its strategic location.
So in a sense, we're combining the interpretations we have from the Bible of the geography with the archaeological record here.
Yes.
And the two together say, this was Gat.
Absolutely.
Can you show me?
Sure, let's go in.
All right.
As we make our way through the dig site, Aaron points out we're walking past ruins that date back to the Iron Age, including David's time, the 10th century BC.
Right in this square here, we found something that can culturally relate to the Philistines and the story of Goliath specifically. Now, if we look in this square here, you can see here the various levels, and each level here represents a different period. So for example, this is the modern phase. This would be about the 8th century BCE. This would be about the 9th century BCE, and this would be the 10th century BCE, more or less the time of David. Most fascinating, we found a sherd with an inscription.
Ah, you've got something in your pocket.
Exactly, I'm hiding it from you.
Okay.
It's part of a bowl.
Okay, can I take a look at that?
Absolutely.
So this is some sort of writing. Yeah, okay, I can't read that. Can you read that?
Yeah, well, we have a good suggestion what it means. Our suggestion is it's 2 names. One is something of the sort of Alwat,
Okay.
and the second one is something like Walat.
Alwat Walat. What does that mean?
Aaron says that Alwat Walat, when transliterated between languages, becomes Goliath, or Goliath.
It tells us that the description of the battle between David and Goliath, and placing it in the 10th century BC as the biblical chronology does, has some authenticity from a historical point of view.
Just because this says Alwat, which could be Goliath, doesn't mean that this is the Goliath. It could have been like Joe, right? And everyone's named Joe.
Well, this is not an inscription of the Goliath, but let's call it's an inscription of a Goliath.
How many potsherds did you find with names on them?
Very few. We have a few inscriptions. This is, even if this was not connected to Goliath, this would be a unique find.
What about beyond pottery? Have bones been found here in Gat? Human bones?
Yes, yes.
Of giant stature?
No, they're actually human bones and the size, which is very typical of that period. Nothing outstanding.
Then beyond pottery and beyond the bones here, do we know where the battle itself took place?
Based on the biblical text, if we go about 15 kilometers to the east, we can find the spot which fits in perfectly with the description of the battle.
The Valley of Elah.
Absolutely.
Let's go there.
Okay.
I'm on a quest to find evidence of the Bible's most memorable king, King David. After sifting for artifacts on my own, I enlisted an expert. He showed me the remains of the Philistine city of Gat and possible proof of someone named Goliath. Now I'm off to explore the battle site itself. According to the Bible, the battle between David and Goliath took place in the Valley of Elah. Many experts have studied the biblical description of the valley and compared it to the topographic record here in Israel. Archaeologist and Professor Aaron Meyer says he knows the location of this valley, just under 10 miles from the city of Gat. We're going up high to get the best view.
Is the hill in the background there.
2 hills over.
Yes, exactly, where they have the trees on the top. And the Philistines were on one side, and the Israelites were on the other.
And in the middle, where the highway is today, is the Valley of Elah, where the battle took place.
Exactly.
According to the Bible, the contest between David and Goliath is the ultimate standoff between two of Canaan's warring peoples, the Israelites and the Philistines. At the start, the Philistines have the upper hand. Their fiercest warrior, Goliath, is an experienced fighter, heavily armed and huge. Over 9.5 feet in height, Goliath intimidates his opponents. For 40 days, he taunts the Israelites, daring anyone to face him one-on-one. David, just a young shepherd at the time, steps up to the Philistines' challenge. He refuses to wear armor, choosing instead to face the giant with a staff and a sling, homemade weapons of war. As the Bible tells it, David, with only 5 stones from a nearby stream, sets out to defeat the giant. The first shot, a direct hit, right between the eyes. After he slays Goliath, David cuts off his head. With this victory, David saves the Israelites from certain defeat.
It's exciting to think that we're actually looking out over one of the most famous confrontations in biblical history. This is where David and Goliath met, somewhere right below us.
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool.
The defeat of Goliath, somewhere in this valley, was David's first stop on his way from local hero to global legend. But could a simple stone have really slayed a mighty giant? To find out, I'm heading back to Jerusalem. This is Tsahena, who comes from Ethiopia, and this is Daniel, a local Israeli. Like the young shepherd David, they're both champion marksmen, familiar with using a sling to throw stones.
Tsahena, good to see you.
Hi.
Daniel, how are you?
How are you?
So I've come for a lesson in how to use slings, to understand whether or not a sling could actually kill a person.
You want to kill Goliath?
Exactly, I want to kill Goliath. So let's start with the actual sling itself. In terms of like the length, what's a good length for the rope?
From here?
Yeah.
To here.
From here to here?
Yeah.
From your hand
Yeah.
to your far shoulder?
Yeah.
So now what about actually the throwing it? What's the technique?
Daniel tells me there are 2 ways to launch a stone, overhead or sidearm. To take down a 9.5-foot giant, I should swing it overhead and give it some serious velocity.
Yeah, you release
Yeah.
Here.
Release this when this here.
so you can control the direction of the slingshot, more or less.
Yeah.
Of course, to properly test the destructive power of a sling, we need one critical component. Enter the giant. This is our Goliath, a clay head 9.5 feet above the ground. Now, to battle.
But honestly, if I do this, you guys should be really far away.
But you need to be careful because it's very, very dangerous.
Okay.
Daniel gives me some final advice on how to wear and load the sling. And he reminds me that a good slinger can launch a stone at speeds up to 100 miles per hour.
Okay.
Kill somebody. that
Kill
you not
yourself.
want.
Yeah. Okay. You should probably get out of the way. Sorry, I hooked that one. Oh, clearly, I'm not the best warrior on this team. So here, Daniel, why don't you keep going?
Okay.
We'll take turns. That was close. I wouldn't want to face you on a battlefield. You see that throw? It's like 10 pounds of rock coming right at you. Damn! That was a good one. We didn't kill him, but I think we nicked him. He went for the jugular. But I think this would actually classify as a flesh wound. So, let's put our giant back up. Got it. We'll try again. You think he's gonna hit him?
Yes.
I don't know. If he doesn't, I think you can go finish him off. Whoa, you hit him in the ribs. He's a tough giant. Finish him off.
Watching these guys, it becomes clear David might have picked the ultimate weapon.
Oh, that was awesome. Look at that. I think it was the competitive cross action. I think we're gonna have to watch the slow motion instant replay on that one. I think it's safe to say that our giant is dead.
Perhaps David could have killed Goliath with one precision hit, just as the Bible reports.
So I think you're both named David now. Thank you very much. Daniel, thank you very much. And I'm a second Nolan. Thank you. Thank you very, very much. That was exciting. We killed our giant.
Yeah, he did.
He's dead.
And another part of the biblical story rings true. I'm traveling through Israel, trying to determine if the Bible's King David was man or myth. So far, I've seen evidence that suggests parts of David's story could be true. There could have been a Philistine giant named Goliath, and David could have killed him with a single stone.
Oh, that was awesome!
But what of David's story after the battle? The Bible tells us the prophet Samuel goes to Jesse of Bethlehem to anoint a king of Israel among his sons. It's David who is chosen. But there's no joy for the young man. His victory over Goliath and the other victories that followed have unleashed the envy of Saul, the first king of the Israelites. Forced to go on the run, he quickly goes underground. According to the Bible, his hideout is the cave of Adullam. Could traces of this cave still exist? I'm traveling west from Jerusalem into the heart of ancient Israel. I want to see if there's any evidence of the place in which the Bible says David wrote some of the most famous Psalms. I've re-enlisted the help of archaeologist and professor Aaron Meyer. As I learned earlier, Aaron's an expert at placing ancient biblical sites on the modern landscape.
Wherever you go in this area, you can find caves on any slope, on any mountain.
Look how big this is.
And it keeps on going.
Well, let's see how far it goes.
Aaron tells me this cave is just one of many in a network known as the Adullam system. David might have sought refuge from King Saul in this very cave, or a similar one in the surrounding region.
Well, in the book of Samuel, we have the description of how David is escaped from King Saul's court. We know that King David and his band hid out in this area. And in the description, in this cave or caves, hundreds of warriors managed to hide out. And the size of this cave would be a good illustration of the type of cave that David and his band of warriors would be hiding out in.
So again, we're looking to the modern landscape for parallels with the biblical description. Let's keep going.
Okay, let's do it.
This is so cool. And from the outside, you never would know this was here.
Okay, now here we're going to have to start crawling.
Sounds like fun.
Aaron explains that this part of the cave system was created after David's time. But there's always the chance that back then, someone with the right tools could have carved an intricate tunnel system like this, complete with trapdoors and emergency exits.
Sure. So people actually lived here?
Well, they lived here, they hid out here. It was someplace to go when you had to hide from your enemies.
Aaron says no archaeological proof has yet linked David to this cave or any other. But the presence of these types of caves suggests the possibility that this part of David's tale may also be based on truth.
The story of David and a cave of Adullam is not something made up by somebody who did not know this region very well.
Yeah.
According to the Bible, David continues to elude King Saul. With each victory over his enemies, David's power grows. Eventually, he's crowned the king of the Israelites and given this promise from God: "Thine house and thy kingdom shall be established forever." Remarkably, possible evidence of David's bloodline, if not the divine promise, has been found. I'm traveling 150 miles north to Tel Dan in the Upper Galilee to examine a truly remarkable find.
For the past 2 centuries, most of the evidence pointing to King David has been geographical, not archaeological. But here at Tel Dan in the summer of 1993, a discovery was made that changed everything.
Biblical archaeologist Ifat Taharani Suseli and I examined the grounds at Tel Dan. She says that this site has been excavated extensively for the past 40 years.
So Dan was a fortified city.
Dan was a well-fortified city, yes. It had a 3-gate complex that actually surrounded the town and protected it from invaders.
Ifat explains that in the 10th century BC, Dan was the northernmost point of the Israelite kingdom. Its location was prime for enemy attack. So by the 9th century BC, the city and its leaders were protected by a well-designed system of gates and walls.
So welcome, Josh, to the outermost gate of Tel Dan.
This was it here.
The fortifications of Tel Dan are certainly impressive, but I've come here to see something else.
So tell me the story of this discovery.
Yes, it was during the excavation of...
Ifat explains that a surveyor stumbled upon something amazing while sweeping the stones of one of Dan's external buildings.
the serving.
And what'd she find?
And here is a replica of what she found.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Can we pick it up?
Yes, of course.
All right.
Yeah, this is actually the most important artifact that was found in Israel so far.
And this language is written in what?
In Aramaic, archaic Aramaic, dated to the 9th century BCE.
So the most important part of it is which line?
Line number 9.
This line here?
This line here.
Okay.
House of David, Beit David.
David, really?
David.
And this is the first reference we have to David anywhere outside the Bible.
House of David.
The House of David.
It talks about his dynasty, the dynasty that he founded in the 10th century. We hear about this dynasty during the 9th century in regard to the Israelite kingdom. These letters changed the entire history of archaeology in Israel.
The real artifact is so important that today it remains under the constant care of the Israel Museum. Ifat tells me most experts believe the stela doesn't point to just any David, but indirectly to King David himself, as this was a man of tremendous wealth and power. Only the most influential leaders of ancient times were called by name in reference to the kingdoms they created. And since no other ancient inscriptions have been found with the full phrase House of David, the Tel Dan stela could be the first proof of the Davidic dynasty itself.
Has this been authenticated?
Yes, it was checked by geologists, by historians, by archaeologists, so there is no doubt about the authenticity of this inscription.
So people who in the past may have said, well, we're not sure he's a real person, when this was found, the hunt began all over again.
That's true, because now there is no doubt we are talking about an historical figure.
Yeah.
A figure named David actually existed.
The Bible tells us that once David is crowned king, he sets his sights on conquest. His target, one of the few remaining independent territories in the land of Canaan. Its heavily defended stronghold is called Jebus, home to the Jebusite tribe. Today, it's called Jerusalem. But for David to conquer the city, he must first find a way to enter the fortified castle called Zion. Others have tried and failed, but David and his nephew Joab are determined to succeed. I'm heading back to Jerusalem to find out how. Outside the walls of the Old City, there's a region today called the City of David. Some experts believe it's the place where the Bible says David eventually established his capital. Today, it's a tourist site run by the Airdate Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to the research and preservation of King David's legacy. Doron Spielman is its director of development. He tells me the City of David isn't just a tourist destination, it's a hotbed for archaeology.
Excavations today are taking place in 4 sites throughout the city, 2 of which deal directly with the time period of David.
Doron takes me to see what David might have faced when he and his armies arrived at the fortifications of Jebus.
This was a 12-story building, supporting along an entire hill, a massive superstructure at the top of the hill, which was the Jebusite stronghold.
Can we take a closer look?
Let's go inside.
The second book of Samuel mentions that when David approached the city, the ruling Jebusites mocked him. Their walls, they said, were impenetrable. You will not get in here. Even the blind and lame can ward you off. Doron and others believe these ruins are the remains of those mighty Jebusite walls, mentioned in the Bible as part of the fortress of Zion. This is now known as the stepstone structure. And Doron tells me it's the largest pre-Davidic ruin ever found in Israel. It dates to 1800 BC.
And so somehow David manages to get inside this wall.
He does. In fact, the Bible relates an obscure line. The day that David conquers the Jebusites, he says with his own words, "He who conquers the Jebusites grabs onto the tzinor." Tzinor is an obscure Israeli word.
Doron explains that tzinor is thought to mean water shaft or pipe.
Do you want to see it?
I would love to see it.
Follow me.
Okay.
We set out to explore one of the city's underground waterways. This is Warren's Shaft. It was discovered in the 1800s by a British explorer of the same name.
Good thing I brought some flashlights.
Doron says this tunnel is more than 200 feet long.
We're getting wet. It's definitely spring water. Yes.
It was once thought to be the secret path that David and his army took to get under the Jebusite walls. But recent dating proved that this tunnel wouldn't have been usable until the 8th century BC, 2 centuries after David needed it. Today, though, it's our pathway to a remarkable new find.
So if David wanted to sneak into the city, well, it might not have been this exact route. It was very much like this. Absolutely. Narrow and wet.
Doron reassures me there's a point to all this getting wet, but to find it, we'll have to keep going. We now know that parts of David's biblical tale are supported by modern discoveries and theories. David could have killed Goliath with a simple yet deadly ancient weapon.
That was awesome!
Evidence of a powerful Davidic dynasty, a house of David, has been found. And David could have invaded Jebus from underground. I'm still at the City of David with director Doron Spielman, trying to find out exactly how. Doron says from here on out, we will connect with more tunnels and rooms recently discovered by City of David archaeologists. These date to around 1800 BC, definitely usable in David's time.
Okay, so this is the way he actually went.
Exactly.
Doron tells me the core of Jebusite Jerusalem is above us. Now, we're deep within the bedrock.
Well, just in front of us, the dry road, as soon as he landed, he must have had one heck of a battle.
So we're out.
Doron says we're now standing in the reservoir of what used to be Jerusalem's only freshwater source, the Gihon Spring. It was the source of life for the Jebusites, and they would have fought to the death to protect it.
So they didn't expect anyone to come this way.
They didn't. In fact, we know for 850 years before David, this was considered the most secure place in the city.
Doron shows me the rest of the route he believes David took from here straight into the heart of Jebus. This, he claims, was the only way in.
Now, for the entire battle of the city, for David and his troops in the mission to conquer Jerusalem, this was the last leg. David's cunning and brilliance really plays forth here.
Right here?
Right here. Instead of going over the walls like every army had tried for 800 years before him, David goes beneath the city walls to achieve his final goal. He would have had to have scaled up ropes, fighting the entire way into the city. This is what it took to conquer Jerusalem.
Once he got in, he was basically, well, not home free, but at least inside the wall and able to do battle from within.
He's, in fact, managed to do a commando raid 3,000 years ago.
Doron says this is yet another part of the biblical tale that seems to match the physical landscape. David could have conquered Jebus and established Jerusalem via an existing waterway. But what next? The Bible tells us that David unites the feuding tribes of Israel under his rule. It becomes the first united kingdom of Israel, and its success is vital to the future history of both Christians and Jews. According to the Bible, he initiates a series of ambitious pursuits, expands the existing citadel, wages war on any enemy who threatens his state, and lays the groundwork for a magnificent palace. And now, after 2 centuries of digging in Israel, archaeologists may have found physical proof of one of David's final achievements, a 10th century BC palace fit for a king. At another site within the City of David, Chief Archaeologist Dr. Eilat Mazar has agreed to show me around. She tells me this excavation is one of the most important digs in progress today.
Right, but the site has compelling potential.
Great potential.
You know, right? But this is what the issue is.
Yes.
Is that this could prove that King David actually lived.
Yes, this is one of the main points in the history of Jerusalem.
Eilat conducted the first phase of her research here in 2005. Just recently, with the help of the Shalem Center in Jerusalem, she secured funds to launch this full-scale excavation. Eilat tells me this dig is still in its infancy, So far, only 20% of the area here has been explored. I'm amazed. In all my travels, I've never seen a dig site with so much activity going on. Today, more than 70 people are taking part.
This is great. I didn't expect it to be so busy.
Yes.
We got people above us, we got people digging over here.
Eilat says that at this site in 2005, she uncovered parts of a 100-foot section of wall that she dates to the 10th century BC.
Can we go in and take a look and see what else is here?
Yeah.
This way?
Yes.
Okay.
Eilat believes the dig here may one day provide the clearest evidence to support the theory that Jerusalem was a major city at the time of David. This runs counter to claims made by other archaeologists that in the 10th century BC, Jerusalem was simply a hill country village, and King David, an unimpressive leader of a poor rural town.
Such a construction and such a major an overcome of this very steep bedrock and all kinds of cavities all around. Whoever built this area needs to have a very highly skilled ability of construction. Otherwise, they wouldn't have overcome it.
Eilat tells me what she has uncovered is part of a large Phoenician-style public building. This could be a vital clue. According to the Bible, one of King David's allies was a Phoenician king named Hiram of Tyre. The Bible says that Hiram sent messengers along with cedar logs, carpenters, and stonemasons to build King David's palace. Eilat says this location and the craftsmanship she's uncovering appear to match the biblical story.
It was something that shows a great ability of the ruler that was here at the same time. Determination and ability, centralization of qualities. It has to be a very strong ruler, whoever it was. Most probably King David.
Okay.
More research and tests are needed to prove whether this site contains the remains of King David's palace, or, as Eilat's skeptics argue, maybe more remains from the Jebusite fortress of Zion, or another remarkable building never written about in the history books. But one thing's for sure.
Everybody agrees that we're talking about a very monumental construction, whatever it is, right?
Okay.
This is unquestionable.
What is it that you would love to find here that would definitively say King David lived here?
Well, this is the King David's residence. Nice to have you with us.
Something that says that King David slept here, King David ruled here.
It's always nice to have something written. Now the area speaks, and we only document, and then we can make interpretations of everything. The interpretations can be argued. The facts cannot.
Today, 80% of the site remains to be excavated. In time, Eilat says, the research will speak for itself. But for now, she and her crew will just keep digging.
Eilat, if you find anything that says King David ruled here, King David slept here, will you give me a call?
Immediately.
While some people believe the story of King David is simply a legend, more and more people are changing their minds. Over the last 2 centuries, evidence has been found that links parts of the Bible to the archaeological record. In the near future, even more proof may be revealed, showing us the greatness, political strength, and historical influence of Israel's most famous warrior and ruler, King David.